Hello. So, this week we are discussing the scattering problems. Scattering, as you know, is a very important topic in the irrespective of which mechanics you are talking about. Even in quantum mechanics, scattering is important. In last lecture, we talked about, we basically defined the problem of scattering, that describe the scattering setup or laboratory setup for scattering experiments, and then looked at some specific examples like scattering by hard sphere and also by Coulomb kind of forces or inverse square law, which is repulsive in nature. Today I will describe few more examples and then talk about how to switch to laboratory frame from our calculation frame, okay, which is done in the assuming that the scatterer or the target is fixed in the space. Okay. So, this is what we will do. Let me revisit the last problem, the Rutherford scattering, which is inverse square law scattering. Here in the first case I had taken the repulsive inverse square law, which is proportional to, so the force is proportional to 1 over r square. Okay. What kind of trajectories we get? This is what we looked at yesterday. The kind of trajectories, not very surprising. If you send a particle towards the scatterer, the particle is has its own kinetic energy. So, it goes as close to the scatterer as possible and then is deflected away from the scatterer, okay. And all the trajectories follow the same pattern, except that the potential is diminishing as you go away from the scatterer. So, if the impact parameter is larger, for example, this light green trajectory here, then the deflection is less, whereas if the impact parameter is small, that means it is going to go very close to the scatterer, in which case of course the deflection will be more. And if you are very far away from the scatterer, the impact parameter is very large, then of course the deflection is negligible. So, these kind of trajectories we get in the repulsive inverse square law problems. In case of these problems, we of course fix the geometry. We can calculate the scattering cross section by looking at the perihelion or the point where there is a minimum distance between scatterer and the target and the incoming particle, and then if you put these angles there, we know that the trajectory is symmetric about that point. So, you can calculate the scattering angle there by looking at this these angles there, and then combine that with the trajectory equation. Remember, this theta here is different from this theta here. This is the scattering angle theta. In yesterday's class, I had put extra s there to denote that this was a scattering angle. This theta is measured from the line joining origin and the perihelion. Okay. So, your angle theta here is measured from there, and that is the trajectory of a hyperbola, and from this we can calculate the scattering angle. Now, if I replace this by a attractive inverse square law, then I get this extra minus sign there. What kind of trajectories do you expect? But we have talked about the attractive inverse square law in the last week. We have talked about all possible trajectories there. And what are the scattering trajectories? Unbounded trajectories. Those are basically hyperbolas just like this, but now the trajectories are going to curve around the scatterer rather than getting scattered away from the scatterer just like this. Okay. So, all these trajectories get deflected, but they are deflected around the scatterer, they go around it. Okay. And in fact, if you if I look at this green trajectory, which has a large impact parameter, then of course it gets deflected less than the particle which comes in with the smaller impact parameter. in that case it gets deflected more, okay, which is consistent with what we had done here too. Only difference between this situation and this situation is the way we calculate the angles. Okay. Now, look at the, for example, this rate trajectory, you look at the asymptote there, draw a parallel line to the asymptote, that is your angle of deflection or scattering angle. The angle psi is measured from incoming direction to the perihelion and the outgoing direction. Now, here you can see that the relationship between theta and psi is basically theta is 2 psi minus pi, okay. That is different from this. And we also know the equation of trajectory here, which is 1 over r is equal to mk by L square, and then you have 1 plus epsilon cos theta, and again cos theta is measured from the point of minimum distance, okay. Fine. Now, it turns out you can do this calculation. I am going to leave it to you to do the calculation, show that you actually get the same scattering cross section in both cases. Okay. However, the scattering angles are here, the scattering angles are negative, here the scattering angles are positive, that is the only difference. Now, here what can happen in repulsive case, you also have back scattering, okay. That means a particle which travels directly towards the target, that means its angular momentum is 0, it will go very close to it, and once its kinetic energy diminishes, it turns back along the same line with a 0 angular momentum again. And you have something similar to that, there basically the scattering angle, in which case changes from 0 to pi. What about this one? Can you see that if I reduce this scattering this impact parameter even further, what would happen? This turning, actually particle would come back into the third quadrant here at retracing. So, there is a back scattering happening here too, only thing is that back scattering actually happens around the target rather than going closer to the target and returning from the target, it goes around the target. So, the same considerations everywhere will work, and you can calculate the differential cross section which comes out to be same. Now, while doing all this calculation and while deriving the formula for differential cross section, we made a simplistic assumption, and I just want to discuss that part for a moment before I go and look at few more examples of scattering. So, here in the case of repulsive power law, what we have is this, the potential curve looks like this. This is 1 over r potential, okay. Add to this is your angular momentum term, that is L square by 2 m r square. But then even if I add 1 over r square to this 1 over r curve, the rough nature of the curve is similar. It is convex, it is monotonically decreasing, and it looks almost same. Okay. So, here if I calculate the scattering angle, then scattering angle comes out to be epsilon square minus 1 is equal to 2 is by k. This is what we derived in yesterday's lecture. And you look at this variation of this theta s, smaller impact parameter, back scattering. The angle is the angle of deflection or scattering angle is almost equal to pi. When the impact parameter is very large, very far away from the scatterer, there is a minimal deflection, that means the scattering angle would be 0. The variation of scattering angle, so here is the formula, I can always plot this theta s versus impact parameter s, and you can see that the curvature here is something like this. Okay, this is for this problem. And if you look at this curve here, this actually uses the approximation which, or rather assumption that we made about this potential is, if I take a impact parameter here, then the particles are scattered in this angle here, okay. And in the same way, if I take a different impact parameter, then something like this happens. Different impact parameters, the particles have different scattering angles, or in other words, scattering angle is a monotonic function of S. It is decreasing, but it is monotonic function of S. No two impact parameters, different impact parameters, the particle will get the same deflection. But this is something that happens in this case, but that is not a very necessarily common thing to happen. It can very easily happen that two impact parameters can have the same scattering angle. Here is one possible example. Okay. Look at a potential energy curve which is given by this curve here. Here the potential energy, this is again repulsive, towards here there is a flattening of the curve. So, probably the force becomes negligibly 0 there, but importantly this one here is finite, okay. And because it is finite, once you add L square by 2 m r square, then of course this effective potential energy curve will go all the way to the infinity. But look at what happens to L is equal to 0. L is equal to 0 is basically 0 impact parameter. L is equal to 0, the potential, effective potential also will look exactly like this, because now there is no angular momentum. And now the kind of curves that you could get are something like this. If I send a particle with a particular energy which is larger than this maximum value of the potential here, what happens to that particle? It has a 0 impact parameter, 0 angular momentum. So, it is travelling directly towards the scatterer, but at r is equal to 0, it simply will pass through, because as it approaches the scatterer or target, its velocity is not 0, it has non-zero velocity, it will pass through and it will get forward, it will travel in forward direction. What does that mean in terms of the deflection? The deflection is 0 there, okay. This is what is shown here. So, the typical scenario here for 0 angular momentum, when impact parameter is 0, the scattering angle is 0, there is no deflection, that is what will happen. Now, at large distances this potential vanishes, and so does the L square by 2 m r square, okay, that term. Effective potential goes to 0. So, what happens when you have large impact parameter? Large impact parameter means the particle is far away from the target, that also does not get appreciably deflected. That is also the case where the scattering angle will be 0. So, what would be the curve in between? In between somewhere you have scattering angle which increases to some maximum value and then decreases to 0. Okay. So, this is the typical scattering angle versus impact parameter curve would look like, that is for this potential. Okay. Now, immediate consequences of this is, now you look at two different impact parameters, they actually give you the same scattering angle. This is because of the nature of the curve now, nature of the curve has a maximum, it is not a monotonic function anymore. So, in this case what do we do? Remember, when I was calculating the scattering cross section using a formula here, I made that assumption that 1 s, one impact parameter gives you 1 theta, one deflection. Now, since we have more than 1 s values which go into the same solid angle, I need to take a sum over. So, here is of course a function which is 2:1, 2 impact parameters result into one angle. Can you have 3 impact parameters resulting into one? Oh, that can also happen. So, depending on the type of potential, your deflection function or the graph of scattering angle versus impact parameter could have more than one maxima, and in which case this summation will have to be done over all possible impact parameters, which results into the same scattering angle. Okay. But there is a one more interesting feature to this graph here. Look at this graph. What happens at theta m? At theta m, the curve is flat. What does that tell you about d theta by ds is 0 here? What will happen to ds by d theta? It becomes infinite. So, what will happen to the scattering cross section? Near this impact parameter or near the theta m angle, your scattering differential cross section is infinite, and beyond that it is 0, because after that there is nothing there, there are no scattered particles in that region, okay, where theta more than theta m. So, differential cross section becomes infinite near theta m, and after that there is nothing, and this one particularly is called as rainbow scattering. Okay. So, there are various situations in which you can have you may have to carefully investigate this formula to calculate total cross section there. Okay. Now, I will just talk about few more examples where what kind of scattering can actually take place. We will not do the actual calculation and calculate scattering cross section there, but just describe the type of orbits or type of trajectories that we can get. Here is one more example. So, power law scattering is basically the potentials which are of the form of 1 over r to the power n or r to the power n. Okay. R to the power n of course will not give you the unbounded orbits. So, it is usually 1 over r to the power n. Now, here I am going to take one specific example. It basically will work for all other cases. Look at this curve here. This is the potential energy 1 over r to the power 4. Okay. The curve is again monotonically decreasing. This is just the potential energy. If I calculate effective potential energy, how will this graph change? Well, this graph will look almost same. Again, for the repulsive case and the monotonic function, now the effective potential has exactly same form. This form is also similar to the form that we got for inverse square law. What do you expect? What kind of trajectories you are likely to get? Exactly same kind of trajectories, though in case of inverse square law 1 over r potential, these were hyperbolas. Now, they may not be hyperbolas, but the trajectory has a qualitative feature which is similar to the inverse square law. The particle comes closer and gets deflected, and larger is the impact parameter, smaller is the deflection. Okay. So, this is for the repulsive 1 over r to the power 4 potential scattering. Now, let us look at the attractive one. That is where the lot of surprises will come. Okay. So, here of course, the scattering angle again will vary from pi to 0 as s goes from 0 to infinity. For the attractive one, now here this potential is attractive one, it is minus k divided by r to the power 4. What would the effective potential energy look like? So, the effective potential energy would look like this. If L is equal to 0, then of course, V effective and V r they are same, in which case this graph is simply starts from minus infinity and then goes in this in this quadrant and goes to 0 as r goes to 0. It is always negative, but when you add this second term L square plus 2 m r square, you get V effective. Now, what will happen? 1 over r to the power 4 is a rapidly increasing function as r goes to 0. So, quite naturally this graph will go all the way to minus infinity, unlike what happened in case of inverse square law. In that case, remember, as r goes to 0, 1 over r square dominates over 1 over r and the graph goes to positive infinity, but not in this case. In this case, it will go to negative infinity. And in addition, now you have a maximum here, and then as r goes to infinity, because beyond certain value of r 1 over r square will start dominating. That is when you get these positive values, and then eventually both 1 over r square 1 over r to the power 4 will go to 0, resulting in the 0 here. Okay, so, this is the V effective. Now, I will consider several possibilities here. There are two ways in which we can look at the problem. One is I can fix the angular momentum, that is basically fix the impact parameter, okay, and then you change the energy. Okay. So, sorry, you fix the angular momentum, in which case this V effective graph is fixed, and then you change the energy. Okay. Fine. Now, let me look at what kind of trajectories you would get with this one. Now, if I take the energy E1 which meets this graph here, what is likely to happen? The particle comes as close to the origin as possible. It's the E1 trajectory is here, somewhere here there will be a point of minimum, and then it gets deflected, but it has enough kinetic energy that it turns around in the radial direction and starts going away. So, somewhere here there will be a minimum point, and then it starts going away, resulting in a scattering angle there. Okay. So, scattering angle of course will be the angle made here with the horizontal by the trajectory. That is the kind of trajectory you would get if you have energy E1. Now, the second case is look at the energy E3. Okay. Energy E3 is exactly same as the maximum value of V effective there. Now, the trajectories there will depend on the initial condition. Suppose I put this particle at this distance and give a tangential velocity such that its energy is equal to E3, we know that it will be a circular motion. Basically, this is a maximum in the potential, that is where the radial force is 0, or centrifugal force balances the attractive force, and then you get a circular orbit. So, that E3 which I have shown here by a green circle there. But suppose instead of starting the trajectory on the circle there, now I send a particle from infinity towards the scatterer, but energy exactly equal to E3. What will happen in that case? In that case, the particle starts coming closer and closer to the scatterer, but as it comes closer and closer, its speed is dropping, the radial speed is dropping, in which case it will come closer and closer and it will start spiraling into the green circle, but it will get trapped into that, it will never come out, it will keep on approaching that circle, and after infinite time it will settle into that circle. If you take energy E2 which is just below that maximum, okay, now what will happen? If E2 is just below E3, that means the particle eventually will get scattered, okay. But before getting scattered, the energy E2 is basically this graph in the middle, it comes in, it also goes into this circular spiral orbit, it starts spiraling so that it gets closer and closer to the green circle, but eventually E2 unlike E3 does not settle into a circular orbit. This has a turning point, this one eventually will go out. So, it will spiral in and after some time it will spiral out again, okay. And it is difficult to calculate that angle of ejection, but if you can imagine the trajectory, that is very simple to imagine. Remember, there is a turning point, it is same as E1, it comes close to the closest point and then goes off. Only thing is by the time it comes to the closer point, it would have done several rounds, revolutions around the scatterer, and then eventually ejected with some deflection angle. Okay, and we do not know how to calculate that deflection angle right away. And in case of E4, E4 is what will happen in case of E4? Look at this. This one does not have a turning point. It is going to go and eventually crash into the scatterer. So, the trajectory here E4 is the trajectory which is given here, which will eventually come and crash into the scatterer. Okay. Fine. So, these are the kind of trajectories you are likely to get with the attractive power law potential, where the power is of course greater than r square. Okay. What happens to the scattering angle? Now, you look at this very neatly. Suppose I take large s, the trajectories would look like E1. Okay. Trajectories would look like E1 because for large s you would have a bigger hump. Remember, large s, large angular momentum, L square by 2 mr square term is larger. So, you get a larger one. So, if you fix a energy and increase the angular momentum or impact parameter, eventually this maximum will exceed the energy level, and then you get these this area here. Okay. So, for very large s there is a minimum deflection like your E1. As you decrease s, now you are sort of basically it is a inverse relationship. You decrease s, you basically are increasing energy, or the difference between the maximum of the potential and the energy is diminishing. So, what is going to happen is now the scattering angle, which of course is negative because of the attractive potential, will start increasing in magnitude. At some point it would do one whole circle before going out. That means the net deflection would be 2 pi with a minus sign of course. Then further, if you decrease the s value, what will happen? The particle probably would do 2 of the rounds and then get ejected, whose scattering angle would be nearly 4 pi. It goes on, it does more and more. So, rapidly it decreases there. Okay. Beyond this, there is no scattering, because after that the particles go and crash into the target there. Okay. So, that is why I have not considered this side of the possibility there. Okay. So, this is what happens in inverse square inverse power law, where power is larger than 2. One more example, and these are like more common ones, say something like van der Waals scattering. In this case, the potential, there are several models of it. I will just pick one model of it. Okay. So, this is basically 612 kind of problem, van der Waals force, where the potential is given by 1 over r to the power 12 minus 1 over r to the power 6. Okay. This is the potential, and this is a very common model for an intermolecular force. So, two atoms bind themselves together with this potential there, okay, and form a molecule. Right. Now, I will define this factor here, which we will need here to rewrite this V effective. You can see that V effective is basically this V plus L square by 2 m r square, which I have written is as lambda square by r square there. Okay. Now, let us look at what happens. First of all, if I take 0 angular momentum, L is equal to 0, capital lambda is 0. So, if lambda square is 0, what I would get is basically van der Waals force, and you remember van der Waals force basically already has one minimum in it, and that is how basically atom is formed, molecule is formed. So, you have a curve which goes like this, This is just the V of r, that is V effective when L is equal to 0. Then if I add this term L square by 2 m r square, that is for different lambda square is equal to 1, lambda square is equal to 3, then of course you are adding some positive quantity, the graph is of course shifted upwards. And then once you do that, at some point 1 over r square starts dominating and you get this 1 maximum. Okay. 1 minimum is already there, you get an additional maximum there. You go beyond this and then comes a point, and you can do this calculation. This is the point where this is neither minimum nor maximum, which means the first derivative of V effective with respect to r is 0. The second derivative, if it was a minimum or maximum, is either negative or positive, but this is the case where even the second derivative is 0. Okay. And then you increase the value of lambda further, and then it does not have 0 derivative point, okay, it does not have a stationary point. This one actually happens. So, for this one it is very easy to calculate. This happens at about lambda square is equal to about 1.95, okay, and this value here is 0.8 times V naught. So, this is V effective in the units of V naught. So, this is the basically different S values, different impact parameters for given energy. Remember, once you fix the energy, the velocity is fixed. So, basically you have all the particles in the beam coming with the same velocity, and then you can change the impact parameter. Okay, that is how you change the angular momentum. What I will do is I will look at this trajectories of these particles for this given energy E, which is slightly larger than 0.8, okay, larger than this one here, and look at what kind of trajectories you are likely to get if I change the value of S. So, here are some of the possible examples. What will happen if lambda square is equal to 3? That means, if I set my impact parameter in such a way that I get lambda square is equal to 3, the energy is fixed. Okay. What will happen in this case? It simply has one turning point and it goes back. Okay. And if you look at this curve looked similar to all those repulsive potentials we looked earlier. Probably the trajectory looks something like this, where the particle comes closer, faces attractive potential, so it is deflected in the negative direction. Okay. So, the scattering angle is negative and goes downwards. So, it is this curve here, this curve. Okay. Now, look at the second case. For this impact parameter, what would have happened? The particle comes in and then it crosses this. Remember the previous example. What happens if energy is higher than the minimum maximum there? The particle actually goes and crashes into scatterer. That is what happened in the previous example. But look what happens in this one. Even though there is a maximum here, this potential now does not go all the way to the negative infinity, but rises back here. Oh, there is a turning point again, which means this particle will come closer and then turn and go away. So, the possible trajectory is something like this. Instead of crashing into the scatterer, it actually has a turning point and goes away. Okay. So, something like this. And with respect to this, again the particle comes closer, but it does not have enough energy to go around, it gets deflected from here. So, a variety of trajectories are possible in this case. Okay. I will ask you people to think of what would happen if this energy was smaller than 0.8. So, for various energies, you can do a simple analysis of what kind of trajectories you are likely to get. Okay. In all these trajectories, remember, in all these trajectories except the one where there is a maximum here, where the particle gets trapped into spiraling in a kind of orbit. Everywhere else there is a scattering, which means particle eventually will go out to infinity. So, this is the kind of these are the kind of trajectories which we are likely to get in van der Waals scattering. And how would this scattering angle look like? For one particular case, I may want to look at that one. So, this would look similar to, so here this part looks similar to the previous example, which is minus 1 over r to the power 4. But what will happen if you reduce the impact parameter further? Remember, in that case the particle went and crashed into the origin, but not here. This will get scattered. Okay. So, eventually the energies which are above this maximum, they also get scattered, and that scattering angle will now start increasing and will go to the. So, when you have 0, for example, when you have L is equal to 0, you have a case like this, where the particle comes in and has a turning point and goes back. But look, L is equal to 0, that means the particle is actually travelling along the axis directly towards the scatterer. Somewhere on the way it is going to turn back. It is a back scattering. If it is a back scattering, what is the scattering angle? That is in fact plus pi. Okay. So, the scattering angle versus S graph looks something like this, and this graph would look different for different energies there, okay, depending on its energy with respect to this point and these maxima. Depending on that, your scattering angle versus S graph would look quite different. Okay. Right. So, these are some of the examples. I have not calculated the differential scattering cross section for these cases, because it is somewhat hard, but we can actually figure out the at least the type of scattering that you are going to get in all these examples. Okay. Finally, before closing, I will talk about one small issue that we need to discuss. See, when we were talking about the scattering in the laboratory, that is where we do the experiments, and when we did the calculations in these theoretical models, remember in the theoretical models what we assumed was your scatterer or the target sits fixed at the origin, and then we looked at all the trajectories. But that is actually not what happens in actual experiments. In the experiments, the target will face the recoil and it also will move, and if you want to take that into account, we need to look at what actually happens there. What actually happens is something like this. In this case, this is the setup that we see. This is what happens in the laboratory. Earlier I assumed that this scattering center is fixed at the origin, the target atom does not budge, but that is not what will happen. So, if you send a particle initially at t is equal to 0, first target is sitting here with 0 velocity, the particle which is going to come in is at very large distances and is coming towards this. As it comes closer, this will face the recoil, and this will also have a trajectory of its own. So, it will go in one direction, our target particle will go in that direction. Okay. Now, remember, when we calculated the scattering angle, we calculated the scattering angle from origin where the target was. So, it was basically the line between the target and the deflected particle. That angle was called as scattering angle. Now, look at what will happen here. This is the target, this is your travelling particle or the beam particle. The line joining these two is what we considered as scattering. So, this is the angle theta. So, if you look at the asymptote of this with respect to this, that would be your scattering angle theta that we actually calculated in our theoretical models. But in the laboratory what is going to happen is something like this. We have detector here pointing towards the origin. Laboratory is going to measure scattering angle as phi with respect to this original point. In that one you simply have incoming particle and you have outgoing particle. We are looking at only the trajectory of this beam particle and original direction, that is this, versus the scattered direction. So, that would be your angle phi. So, in the laboratory we measure phi, in theoretical calculations we had theta. So, when we calculated that scattering cross section using this angle theta, but that is not what laboratory people or experimental physicists are giving us. When they are giving us the results to compare, they are giving results with respect to this phi here. Now, to analyze this, what we can do is this. So, basically this r is the relative vector. In all our calculations as a two body problem, the r vector was r2 minus r1. So, basically it is a vector pointing from one particle to the other particle. That is exactly what this particle is, okay. And that theta is the calculated angle and phi is the observed angle. Now, what we need to really understand here is to obtain this relationship, all I need to do is understand how center of mass is moving. So, at t is equal to 0 or initial point, this had 0 velocity and this had some incoming velocity. Center of mass would be sitting somewhere here in between the two particles along the line joining this, not in necessarily in the middle, but somewhere along that line. And what would be velocity of center of mass? Velocity of center of mass would be exactly parallel to the incoming velocity here, because this one has a 0 velocity, okay. And we know in central force problems the center of mass moves along the uniform trajectory. So, it moves along the straight line path there. If it does, then immediately notice that the axis of your experiment and the trajectory of center of mass, they are actually parallel to each other. So, the angle theta, which we actually thought of as angle between r vector and the axis of the experiment, it also is angle between relative velocity along this r direction and the center of mass velocity. So, all we need to do is, instead of calculating this angle between r and axis of the experiment, I will calculate angle between the velocity, relative velocity v or r dot and the center of mass velocity. That will give me theta. And the same way this angle phi also can be thought of as the angle there, the velocity measured in the lab frame and velocity measured velocity of center of mass, the angle between these two will be your phi angle, okay. Once we realize this, then our calculation will become easier. Basically, we are going to obtain this relationship between the two. So, to look at that, I will draw this diagram. So, r1 vector here is the vector which is seen in the actual frame. This r1 prime is the velocity seen in the center of mass frame. This angle here is basically theta and this angle here is phi, okay. This is the actual velocity seen in the laboratory frame and this is the velocity seen in the center of mass frame. And what is the relationship between the two? The actual velocity is basically velocity seen in the center of mass frame plus the velocity of the center of mass, okay. So, that is the relationship we have, and from this we can quickly calculate the relationship between theta and phi there. So, remember this this is basically the velocity from the inertial frame, this is from the I mean the lab frame, this is velocity of center of mass, this is velocity measured in the center of mass frame. And from the graph, of course, it is very easy to see velocity of center of mass is parallel to the axis of the experiment. So, V 1 that is V 1 cos phi must be equal to V 1 prime cos theta and plus the magnitude of V center of mass, and similarly the second equation is the projection along y direction. Take a ratio of these two. If you take a ratio of these two, I immediately get tan phi, which is sin theta divided by cos theta plus V center of mass divided by V 1 prime. So, all I need to do is calculate this ratio here. Now, do that very simply. Remember, momentum is always conserved. If momentum is conserved, I mean net momentum. So, m 1 plus m 2 into velocity of, so total mass into center of mass velocity, that is the net momentum, that is exactly equal to m 1 times V 0. V 0 is the velocity at r is equal to infinity when the particle was injected in. Then I can write this as the velocity of center of mass is nothing but mu divided by m 2 times V 0. Can you see that? If I take this m 1 plus m 2 to the right hand side and multiply and divide by m 2, that gives me this equation. Also the kinetic energy is conserved. Okay. So, the net kinetic energy is, this is kinetic energy at t is equal to 0 when the particles were thrown in, half m 1 V naught square, that must be equal to, and this remember we did in the very first lecture on central forces, it is kinetic energy of center of mass plus the kinetic energy of effectively single particle, but with a reduced mass mu. And then in this equation I am going to put the first result. If you put the first result and simplify this, it is just 2 steps in between, simplify this and then you get V 0 is exactly equal to this relative velocity V. Okay. That is second result. This is the result we will use. Now, you look at this one, V 1 is V center of mass plus V 1 prime, and then you substitute, you remember this result, V 1 prime is nothing but mu divided by m 1 times the relative velocity V. How do you get this? Remember, r 1 vector is related to center of mass and the relative distance r, and if you take a derivative I get this relationship here. Okay. Now, here V center of mass divided by V prime. So, I now have everything. You put this here and you get mu by m 2 times V naught, that is V center of mass, and divided by V 1 prime, which is mu by m 1, and that factor is exactly equal to m 1 by m 2, and I can put that factor here, and that gives me the relationship between the laboratory measured scattering angle and the scattering angle that we had used in the calculation of the differential cross section. And now I can easily correlate the differential cross sections from laboratory frame to the calculated frame, okay, or our calculations. And this is how you actually put everything together. Okay, so this sort of sums up our discussion on scattering. In the next week, I will start with a very important topic, which also many students find very difficult, which is basically the rigid bodies, motion of rigid bodies.